Mute that. Hello. Welcome to today's board game design stream. Hello. Yeah. Writing stuff is hard. Whew. Hope your week is going well, the beginning of your week at least. I am pre-Gen Con, so yeah, stuff. I also, so on and off, hello, Drawn Onward, thanks for joining us today. On and off in the past, I've workshopped for Forest Prusian Creative, which is a development company. They've developed games for a variety of publishers. Games such as Villainous is one of the most famous games that they've worked on. Jaws is one of the games they worked on. Horrified, which is coming out soon, releasing at Gen Con, I believe. And a bunch of other really cool stuff. So they're local to Seattle. And they were bought by Funko recently. So now owned by Funko. Still developing games, which is the Funkoverse game that was just announced last week, which is super exciting. Anyways, they have lots of stuff they're working on. They bring in outside contract workshoppers to work on stuff. So of course, 2 weeks before Gen Con, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I should really add like 20 more hours of work to my schedule. So I've been doing that. It's really great. It's fun, and it's also very educational to contract for a company that's full of professional, full-time board game designers. I get to test stuff with other designers. It's really great, but it's just planning everything and seeing my Gen Con schedule just like stack up is a little bit stressful. It's okay. We're not going to worry about that for the next 2 hours. We're just going to worry about making new games. It's going to be a lot of fun. Drawn Onward. That's Prospero Hall, right? Or is that another group? Yes? I think so. Either Prospero... I've seen their names together a lot, so I don't know exactly what the relationship, if it's literally just an imprint name that they have. But I think when you see a Prospero game, I think it's pretty much always Forest Prusian. I don't know. I think Forest Prusian might be like the company name, and Prospero Hall is the imprint, because I don't think I've ever actually seen Forest Prusian as a publisher like on Board Game Geek, or as someone mentioned there. So you know who'd know. I should probably know. The internet. Forest Prusian Creative. They still have their website up. Prospero Hall. Yeah, it's weird because it's like mostly the same stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's a mystery. It's a good question. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a Prospero Hall game that wasn't developed or worked on by Forest Prusian. So yeah, they do a lot of cool stuff. They employ some of the most brilliant game design minds, I believe, who exist today, working behind the scenes. They aren't necessarily individually called out for their awesome creative design work. There's some very amazing designers work there, and I'm very impressed with all the stuff they do, especially since it's mostly IP games. And I think IP games, or intellectual property games based on media, books, movies, that kind of thing. Choose Your Adventure game, that's another one that they worked on. I think IP games have gotten a bad rap in the past because in the past people have kind of slapped an IP on a mechanic, like let's just reskin the Game of Life or whatever and put a My Little Pony theme on it or wherever, which has its place as well. But these games in particular, all of them have been designed by some brilliant minds and then workshopped. All of the games that come out of there, they have testers come in, they have just families and the general public come in just to play the game, and then they have people who are actually there for hours at a time and really hacking on things and grinding on things and finding the edge cases and making really cool games. So it's a cool place to be able to contract for. I'm very lucky to be here in Seattle and able to do that. Welcome to the channel, Senor Bob. Excited to see you here. Excited to hear that you're coming to Gen Con. It's going to be super fun. I know of a few people who've made that last minute decision to come out, so we're going to have an awesome crew of designers there. It's going to be a lot of fun. John Over says, are you pitching at all at Gen Con this year, or should I be talking about new stuff and not really do about Gen Con? Oh my gosh. No, it's okay. I'm not going to forget about Gen Con. My pitching stuff is in an interesting place. So, like, it's funny because I had my quiver full of prototypes, and I have a lot of things that I've been working on and developing over time. I would say, like, a few that I've mentioned in the past: Split the Loot, What to Eat After the Apocalypse, my merge game that I was working on. Like, I don't know, it's very interesting. With what we do here, with the weekly ideating and coming up with new ideas, like, I have so much rich stuff there. And then I have a bunch of things that I've gotten to the prototype phase, and I'm getting to the place with my design work where I think I'm leveling up. Because, again, I'm doing a ton of research, I'm playing a lot of published games, I'm workshopping. I think I'm getting better as a designer, which means I'm getting a little more, not critical necessarily, but I'm taking a sharper eye to the stuff that I'm working on. Split the Loot, for example, is something I pitched at Origins, and I had kind of some interest, but it was a very solid game, very mechanical, had interesting tension about the cards that you keep and the cards that you give away, works very smooth at larger player counts. So it's got a lot of good stuff going for it. Senior Bob had mentioned this on Twitter about how you keep a game from being flat. The game mechanically it was just falling a little bit flat with the treasure theme to it. So as I mentioned, I'd have played around with the Bowerbirds and different potential themes to it. And I think to take this game to the next level, it just needs a little fiero, something where you see the cards and you really do get a sense of draw. It needs some story and narrative to it. So the latest thing that I'm testing, I need to test, is I talked about doing a boy band theme to this. You're like building a boy band and collecting these. I felt a little weird about collecting actual people. So I was thinking, well, you know, it's still kind of a catchy theme, but what if it was memorabilia? And memorabilia wasn't really, for some reason, I'd never thought about that in the original iterations of my brainstorm of things that people get very excited about. A lot of the things I had thought about were like stamps or candy, where you really need brands to go along with it. Like, the generic versions of these things are not as exciting. But for memorabilia, so instead of you're actually collecting members of a boy band, like collecting boy band memorabilia. So I'm going to make another pass on the design with that. Just jam it out really quick. Yeah, and see. So that's really the only thing that I have pitching. I've only been doing the full-time board game design thing for like 6 months. In the beginning, I was hoping to really jam out a lot of games, get a lot of pitch meetings, and just have a ton of stuff going and out there. But then with con season, with doing a lot of travel, doing the streaming and ludology and everything, it turned out to be a lot. And so it's a constant struggle, this thing. I think a lot of designers feel this too, where like, I gotta get more stuff, I just gotta have stuff out there. All the successful designers have a million games going at one time. I think I'm looking forward to, after Gen Con, between Gen Con and PAX West, yeah, I'll have a ton of time then too. Maybe looking into some game design retreats and taking a little more time, or after that, like once con season dies down a little bit, maybe having some more time to dive into things, just letting things percolate a little in the back of my head. And I'm I'm doing a lot of weird game adjacent stuff that's not necessarily pitchable. So the pervasive game I mentioned, Have You Had Enough Cheese? That's not saying I'm pitching to publishers, but I might print it for Gen Con. I don't know yet. I don't know if I'll have time to print it, but that's something I'm working on. Role-playing games. So I'm talking to a few people about role-playing games, system, settings, mostly scenarios for different games. So I have some meetings about that. So kind of all over the place with what I'm working on. But as far as just like taking something I've worked on and pitching it, those are a little bit on the back burner right now. Game biologist, hello. I may have a box of chocodiles with your name on it. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Seems like a good drug to counteract Gen Con stress. Oof, yeah. Oh my gosh, that chocodiles. I think we talked about this. I forget exactly what they were, but I think it's candy or candy adjacent, and that makes me very happy and less stressed. Senior Bob, I have a game to pitch, but I was going to try and shop it around at PAX U since Gen Con schedules are probably full. Yeah, it's a tough one. My general advice is if you can set up meetings, and the Cardboard Edison Patreon publisher list is a great place to start to look for publishers. Send out emails if you can. Just going around to booths and starting to meet people is a great place to start to build relationships with publishers. I did this at Origins pretty effectively. PAX Unplugged is really great for that, as at least in the past, people have been a little less slammed. Gen Con's a little tough. I think Gen Con's the one show where you're more likely to get rejected for a in-person meeting, which can be rough. Like a few of the shows that I went to, there's a few companies I cold approached at PAX Unplugged to pitch games to, and they just didn't have time, so it's a little getting that rejection in person, at least for me, can be a little emotionally intense, but it's worth a shot. And then just a lot of times when you're hanging out with people, the other designers, publishers will come up, and so you might just meet some people and get a first introduction that way. Is it just have your game, just playing it, sitting down at tables, breaking stuff out. I'm hoping that there will be some time to play test and do play unpublished games with other designers. I would say as long as you have your sell sheets available if anyone asks, as long as you're respectful and not a jerk about it, I don't think it's ever, like, I've never had a super negative reaction, as long as you're not pushy about it with trying to set up those meetings. I have a couple new Kids on the Block posters, still. That's awesome. I love that. Drawn Onward. I've been surprised, Senior Bob. I set up a meeting yesterday, and although it might be tight, you might be able to drop by and do an impromptu pitch. Yeah, exactly. I know some people will do, some publishers will send out a list of their slots, and I've seen slots in there. So there's definitely stuff available. I know some of the publishers who take more pitches. So every publisher is a little different for whether they like to take just 1 million pitches or whether they only want to do meetings. You kind of have to get a sense for that yourself. But some people do just want to see every game. Like a lot of publishers now are being more selective and wanting to see more stuff. So yeah, give it a shot. It never hurts. Drawn Onward. Love PAX West. Wired Life. Greetings. What is pitch in your context? Yes, so we're talking about pitching board game designs to publishers in the board game design industry. Pitching usually involves either initial email context, just to do a elevator pitch, quick sentence blurb, put some pictures in there, maybe a link to your sell sheet. A lot of publishers will have a submissions page for this, or if you go to the Cardboard Edison Patreon and pay a certain amount, you can get a link to an evergreen list of publishers where you can submit your games for consideration. Or just going to conventions. I love conventions for making connections with publishers. And combinations are great too. If you email and say that you'll be at a convention, it's a pretty good chance that you'll get a meeting, as opposed to, hey, I'm submitting my game and I'm just going to blind submit it to you and hope that you figure it out from the rules, which there's totally no way that that could go wrong. Game biologist crocodiles for reference. This is just gonna make me hungry, isn't it? Oh yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So it's less like a crocodile. I had imagined something like this, but like shaped like a crocodile, which maybe I can like shape it myself, or like put little eyes on it or something to make it look more like a crocodile. Senior Bob, I'm hoping to write a couple adventure scenarios for an adventure game Dice Hate Me is developing. Ooh, fun. Yeah, I think it's for anyone interested in getting into the game designer hobby for designing things. Board game, role-playing game kind of fall under the same umbrella. I think it's a great space. It's one I haven't dug too much into, but just from a little digging, I think there's a lot of people who are doing stuff or looking for stuff in this space. The core, people would say, I've heard it said, you know, kind of negative affirmations of role-playing games don't pay anything, or you shouldn't get into it because, you know, you're never going to make a living doing it. But I think it's a growing field. I think now is a great time to get into it, because if you are a writer and enjoy writing, it's like, what are you going to do? Write a book? That's no less competitive, right? I think role-playing scenarios is a little less competitive, and they're looking specifically, publishers for this are looking for the crossover of designers and writers or authors, because I say anyone can write, most people can write, but having skill at creating a rich, interesting fictional universe, creating compelling stories, that's a skill that needs to be developed. And a lot of people either fall into the writer camp or the game designer camp, and being able to view your scenarios with a game design mind is something that there's people need more of. So it's a great place to look at for if you want more stuff to do in this industry. I was joking about the posters. I don't know. People, all these bands are coming back, right? Isn't Backstreet Boys, Spice Girls are back together, right? Like Backstreet Boys are back together. You could have a New Kids on the Block poster. That's cool. Wired Life, thanks for explaining. You're welcome. Always happy to answer questions. We will eventually get to the brainstorming and more design aspects of the stream here. But I'm feeling just in a chatty mood and a little tired, low energy from the work. So I'm happy just to chat and answer some questions, because I know that there's a lot of questions out there and a lot of things I have experience with that I can share with the world. I'm happy to do so. Drawn Onward. I've been making pitch videos lately, and I think it's helped a lot. Not 100% sure, but it seems to be getting returns. Yes. It's such a hard thing to propose to people or tell people, because video making is a skill. If you've never done it before, if you don't have the particular software, it can be very intimidating to get into. Although now with things like iMovie and apps on your phone, you can get pretty good videos without a fancy camera, just using your phone, and with apps that are free or cheap. You can make a perfectly serviceable demo video. And if you can do that, just get good lighting, get decent sound. A microphone is probably the main investment you would want to have to do this, because you don't want to send potential publisher just think it's really grating or tinny. But it's so good, because writing rules that any person can just pick up and understand, it is such an art. And most published board games, honestly, do not have that great rule books. I think most people play most games wrong because of how complicated rule books are. And it's one of the biggest barriers to people getting into board games. And you're staking the success of this your baby, your game that you're shipping off to publishers on you as a designer. You know, you're probably not an expert at writing rule books. If you are, maybe you should just do that for a living, because there aren't enough people writing rule books. You can make the game. It can be a very good game, very solid game, but actually communicating that rules is a very hard thing to do. And a lot of publishers are pretty busy too, you know, so they might just skim over the rule book. They might miss some things. If you can just put together a 2-minute video explaining how your game is played, or most of how your game is played, or just one turn, just videotape yourself and another person moving the pieces around and explaining what you're doing. I won't necessarily say you're much more likely to get a meeting, but at the very least, the publisher is much more likely to understand how your game works and have a more clear interpretation of what it is. Like, that would be second to in-person meeting is always best, right? You can have a conversation, explain what's going on, but the video, way better if you can do it than just sending a rules. And publishers won't always ask for it either. It won't necessarily be part of the submission process. And if you ask them, in the past I've had people say, oh, video's fine, but it's not necessary, you know, but they want to make it easy for you. They're not going to require a video. Nobody that I've talked to requires a video, but I think it's really helpful for them to get an idea of what your game is doing. Senior Bob says, tinny sound probably turns me off the most when I watch a video. It's a subtle thing, right? Like, it's not necessarily something you think about when you're making the video, but if you're watching it, and if somebody, videos you might just watch with the sound off, but for a rules explanation video, you're definitely going to listen to it with the sound on. So a lot of background noise, having it be really tinny, having it be too loud or too quiet. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with audio. So do a listen through, send it to a couple of friends for them to take a quick watch through and see if there's any obvious visual or audio problems. And again, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. You don't have to do fancy production. You can just I don't have my selfie tripod here. You can get a selfie tripod off of Amazon for like 10 or 20 bucks. Get that, hold your camera, have it record, move the pieces around, do a little cutting to it, and then you have that for pitches, and you have it for contests too. Most contests will require a video. And yeah, it's just a great thing to have if you're interested in pitching games. I say go full stop motion style videos of your game playing itself. Yeah, I mean, that's just a cool video, right? You just have that, upload it to YouTube, go viral with it. Just like, there should be a channel for that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Just channel for stop motion video gameplay. You see, this is why these chats are great. We don't always come up with game designs right off the bat, but now we have an idea for a new YouTube channel. Videos of board games with funny voiceovers, because everything's better with funny voiceovers. Senior Bob, you can totally take that if you want to do that YouTube channel. I don't know if I have time for it now. I'd have to learn stop motion, but somebody should totally do that. John Hours says, my game came to life. Yeah, my games are serviceable and work for sending to videos. Yeah, my videos are serviceable and work for sending to publishers. Not great, but fine. Yeah, it's not necessarily what's going to be the how to play, the official how to play video of your game on the front page of Board Game Geek, but yeah, just serviceable. Serviceable is what we're talking about here. So we can keep chatting about this, and I'll keep chatting about it as I'm writing. But let's do some sketches here and start thinking about some designs as well. Senior Bob, on Twitter, you talked about games. How do you make games not be flat? I'm trying to think of like, what's the opposite of flat? I'm just gonna write exciting and then not flat over here. Just as an inspiration, something to start thinking about. Decided to do maybe a Game Design Daily tip Twitter thread for this because I think there's a lot to unpack there. We can also talk about it today a little bit on the show. Game Biologist says, I had to do a demo video for a class project game in college and ended up embedding a voiceover into a PowerPoint presentation that showed the basic mechanics of the game. I hadn't realized that you can automatically save narration on PowerPoint until then. Huh. I didn't know that. Narration on PowerPoint. That's the funny thing, right? When you're working on a project. Like, I already posted this on Twitter, but I'm so excited I have to tell the world. You can put multiple time zones in Google Calendar. Like, this is a total sidebar, and I don't want to go off the rails or spend too much time on this, but I've been going crazy trying to plan my Gen Con schedule with because even if you click into the event, if you make the pop it up, it does the PST time, because I'm Pacific time. So that time is there, and I'm trying to like look back and forth between all these emails and schedule things, and math is hard, so I can't do it automatically in my head. But you can make little rows where it shows the time. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better. So yeah, like with the narration and the PowerPoint, finding things out from playing around from necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Game Biologist says, exciting and not flat. The floor is lava. Lava. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we say flat. So I would say what's the best way to put it? You might not have played many flat games. If you've played a published game that's flat, I think that's a bad sign. I think that means that something got through publication that was serviceable. It was fine. You know, like I was talking about Split the Loot. It works. It's balanced. It's not broken. But the tricky part is a lot of the time the things that make a game balanced and serviceable, make a game function, make a game work, a lot of intelligent game design principles will naturally lead to flatness because you want to get rid of the broken stuff, right? Because the game's not fun if yeah, let's say a game is about rolling dice and you want to get higher numbers to win the game, and you have a D6 through D20 randomly distributed, and each time each person gets a random one of that dice, and one person just gets the D20 4 times in a row. They're probably going to roll the highest, right? So it's not a particularly balanced game. However, if you look at the moments of that game, and at this point, it's not even really a game. I'm just using this as an example because there's really not a lot going on in this example. But imagine those moments when the dice are randomly distributed. Like maybe there's someone who shakes it up and throws it at people, or you draw from a deck of cards. That's probably the best. It's like, there's like a deck of cards that says D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. You know, that's a deck of cards, and you shuffle it up, deal one randomly to each person. So there's no choice or strategy there. You just get your card and you roll the dice. So there's 2 vectors of randomness to it. But when you're about to look at your card and see whether you've got the D6 or the D20, just think about that. Just imagine, picture yourself holding that card in your hand, and there's a drama to it. There's drama and tension because you're invested. And it's funny, you know, talking about this example, I'm sitting here putting my mind, using my imagination to picture this scenario in front of me, and I feel excited. You know, no offense if anyone's game is like, this is a dumb game. It's not, I don't even know if I would call it a game really, because there's no meaningful choices in it. win condition is just, it's completely random, right? No control, no choice. But thinking about holding that card and gonna flip, is it gonna be the D6 or the D20? I'm excited. And I flip it over, it's the D6. I'm like, shoot. I'm the D20. I'm like, yeah, if I get the D20 card twice in a row, just like, this is my day. I'm winning. And you feel, you know that it's random and you have no control over it, but you feel lucky, right? Like this, you feel, it's a weird psychological thing, right? Something good has happened to you, so you must deserve something good happening to you, even though you haven't done anything really to deserve this. The luck is just the luck of the draw, right? But there is the moment of the reveal, the dramatic tension of having either a really good outcome or a really bad outcome. Because there's a variance too. If it was just like imagine you had like a D7, D8, and there are actual dice of these that are not common. You had like a D7, a D8, and a D9, right? There wouldn't be as much tension or excitement about the outcome of that draw. So I'm going to write down dramatic tension and highly variable outcome. And it's not even necessarily, highly variable outcome, uncertainty. I think that's the big part of it, right? Because you can still get excitement or drama in, say, an abstract strategy game where there's little or no uncertainty, but in those situations, the excitement comes from the back and forth of your moves and your opponent's moves, and are they going to make the right choices? Are they going to see, like, you see a really good move for them? Are they going to see that? Are they going to miss it? You have this whole plan laid out. Are they going to do something to get in the way of your plan? So there's stuff there as well. But a lot of times excitement comes from uncertainty and outcomes where the good outcome and the bad outcome are very far apart. Outcome. I'm going to put these in quotes. Good and bad are very far apart, because what is good and bad? Like, and that's the cool thing about a game is you design the context of this. Who's to say you could, this game that I just designed, flip cards D6 through D20, roll dice, do 4 times, with highest score is the winner. So you have total control of what is good and what is bad. I would say you have mostly total control, because you can make this game too where it's race to the bottom, right? The lowest score wins. I would say you don't have total control because there is some psychological difference to that. In general, more is better psychologically. Like, for most things, I'd rather have more than less, unless it's like sickness or broken glass or something. I'd rather have less of that than more of it. But psychologically, more is often better than less. But you could make a game, right, this exact same game, where you want to have the lowest score instead of the highest score, and that completely reverses the spectrums of experience. Cindy Rob says, hire Rodney Smith to do the stop motion video thing. Yeah, maybe get on his calendar and see what his schedule looks like. Gameologist says, I had to do a demo video for a class project. Oh yeah, we talked about that. For the embedding PowerPoint. Senior Bob says, flat is just a mechanical exercise. Yes. So we have exciting here. maybe we'll... so we're looking at the opposite of flat. So I might start another brainstorm for this. And flat isn't necessarily bad. I think especially in our society, and I think this is even more so an American society thing, just as an interpretation of looking at our movies, at the video games we tend to produce, the games, Ameritrash, whatever. Like, we do look for a lot of intensity, a lot of drama, a lot of highs and lows, ups and downs. So this is a judgment call in some ways. So flat's not necessarily bad. You can definitely have more consistent experiences. It all comes down to what you want to create and design as a designer. I think completely flat is a bad thing. Like, that comes down to, like Senior Bob said, just a mechanical exercise. I would say something, if you think about Takedo, you're making a journey across the Japanese countryside, eating tasty foods, painting pictures of the landscape, going to the hot springs, and there aren't a lot of highs and lows. Mechanically, you're trying to get to as many of these places as you can. You're trying to get certain scoring conditions. Someone might block what you're doing, and you have a little bit of tension there. But in general, there's not a lot punishing you, and the rewards are pretty steady. So there's not a lot of ups and downs to it. But there is some. It's not completely flat. There's some strategy to it. There are some choices to it. So it has some texture. I'm going to go back to the exciting brainstorm and add texture to it. So here we have variable. Hopefully this fits on the camera. I might have to tweak my camera a little bit. I think it slowly drifts down. Okay, no, that's good. I probably ruined it now. Texture variability, differences, loops and arcs. So gameplay loop, again, this comes to the texture, the kind of rising and falling action of the gameplay. So something might be happening, you might be getting points, you're buying things up, you're doing a lot of stuff, and then at the end of the gameplay loop you resolve, maybe sell some things. So you have rising and falling action here. Things, different emotions at different times. Sometimes you feel like you have a lot of choices, sometimes maybe not as many choices. You feel excited about your options and then maybe a little down on your options. And even if some of these feelings might sound negative, and I think that's important to talk about, like, negative connotations. You're like, oh, well, I don't want anyone to ever feel bad playing my game, right? I want everyone to be happy and having fun all the time. Well, most games, some people need to feel bad some of the time in order for it to be a fun game. And that's a really weird statement, right? Games need to feel bad some of the time for it to be so flat, no one feels bad ever. Like, think about pretty much any game that you've played or designed or worked on. Abandon All Artichokes is meant to be a pretty easy, straightforward game, family friendly. You're doing the stuff of it, you have a lot of options and choices, you're not really locked into a corner, your turn doesn't get skipped. But there are times when you steal a card from someone and give them an artichoke, right? So you're getting ahead and you're putting them behind. There's times when you flip the top card of their deck, and if you want that card, then you can take it. There's times when someone might compost 3 or 4 artichokes on their turn, and you don't compost any. And you feel, quote-unquote, bad that something happened, but it's that texture, that differential between the good and the bad that creates the friction or the juiciness of the game. Between the And I think the tough part is finding the difference between just plain bad mechanics and good mechanics that make people feel bad. I'll say there's good ways to feel bad. Put this over in our brainstorm as well. For flat, I say doesn't have good ways for people to feel bad. Boop. And good mechanics. So I would say an example of a bad mechanic, and it's tough, because a lot of very fun games that people really enjoy or that sell a lot of copies will have these bad mechanics. So things like someone loses their turn or you skip over someone's turn. Like that's bad and doesn't feel good for the other person. Like if I'm playing games with my friends or with my niece and nephew, right? And with kids, you know, with someone who's not a gamer, and I just completely invalidate everything that they were going to do. Like that's not fun for anyone, but Uno does that, right? Skip or reverse. Lots of games do that. Things, either the game or another player undoing someone's actions. So just as bad or worse as taking away another player's actions is just completely reversing whatever it is they did. Not just taking away from them, but they like move forward 5 spaces and you take them, or the game takes them and just move back. So it's as if their turn had never happened, which is almost worse because they put the thought into it, they make the choices, or the dice makes the choices or whatever, and then it just goes away or goes backwards. They could be worse off than when they started at the beginning of their turn. What else? I think fall into this like bad mechanics. It's providing too many choices. But the moral of the story, what I'm trying to say with all of this is, with good mechanics that make people feel bad, and even these bad mechanics, like, okay, we're being judgy, I'm being judgy, I admit it, these are bad mechanics, right? They give excitement to the game. Like, having those bad things happen to you when something good does happen to you. So especially maybe it happens 3-4 times in a row, you're going back, and then you're feeling this emotionally, unless you totally don't care about the game, you're just like, whatever, I'm rolling dice. If you're invested at all, you go back 3 times, you're gonna feel something, you know, you're gonna feel mad, you're gonna feel frustrated, it's really going to trigger your emotions. And then that 3rd or 4th or 5th time or whatever, when the dice finally comes through and you burst through this block, you have a release and you just feel your fortunes have changed, things were bad. Within the scope of a game, you can feel very intense emotions that mimic emotions, or the same as emotions that you'd feel from real world situations where, you know, you're having a really bad day and your car breaks down and you run out of milk and you stub your toe, right? And then you like finally get home and open up the freezer and realize that there's your partner bought ice cream and there's your favorite ice cream is there in the fridge. Like, it feels even better having the contrast of the bad feelings. So your feelings are more intense because of that contrast. You feel more gooder because of the contrast with the bad. Game Biologist says, and Game Biologist says, oddly, I seem to be designing a lot of stuff for kids that makes them feel frustrated and angry and despairing on the regular, and they want to play it all more than once. Go figure. Kids are weird and fun. But I focus on player versus game rather than player versus player negative energy. Yeah, I think player versus player issues, like where people are actually actively doing things against each other, is pretty tough to balance. And that can lead to some very, just look at Monopoly, right? Where you're even, I mean, Monopoly, you don't even have control over it, but I guess you buy something you know someone else needs. Anything with direct player interaction can be very intensely negative, where you like focus, even though you know, like, oh, well, they had to do that, or it wasn't even their fault that they did that, you associate it with the person, and then you can actually start to get mad at the person. But kids, yeah, and that's why, like, kids love Sorry. I saw this kid, an adult, in my lobby the other day playing Sorry, and we have, in our building, we have a decent board game library. Like, there's more modern stuff, I'll put it that way. And Sorry is a game where you just roll the dice. I don't remember the exact rules, but I don't think you're making choices. I think you just roll, or you pop the popper or something. I forget exactly. But kids, like, you offer them all of the marvels of modern board game design, and a lot of times they still gravitate to games where there's little or no choice, because even more so, kids are activated by this drama and the tension of the good versus the bad. And I think there could be a factor too of, I mean, I don't want to say that kids don't understand randomness, but I guess it depends on the age. Like, I would have to do some research to figure out what exactly is the stage where you realize that something is happening, something under your control is happening randomly. So when you roll a dice and you want it to be a 6 or whatever, and just the probability, like how probability works and randomness, like you want it to be a 6 and you roll a 6, you're like, oh, well, I can just make that happen. You know, I can make it be a 6. So there's probably some age in there where it's a little less logical about how randomness works. Or, like, you know, I always lose at games. I'm unlucky. Like, unlucky isn't really a thing. It's all within the realm and sphere of probabilities. The kids like the drama. Oh, and the other thing that was really cool about kids playing games is they'll do the stuff of the game, which is so exciting. Like, back when I was showing heart catchers to kids, it's with the layout, it's a little weird of like where you put the cards and making your first choices. Like, what do I do? What's the right choice? Kids aren't as tied up in that. You know, they'll just like, you're like, oh, we'll put this card under this card. They're like, okay, I'll do that. You know, they're not as worried about, well, you're tricking, like, well, why? Why did I put that card there? Maybe I should put this card here. I'm going to do this. Is that bad? It's like, no, that's great too. You should do that. It's like, well, you said that's good, so maybe you're tricking me. And adults get all up in their head about a lot of these decisions, and kids are much more likely to not get as hung up in those things, in those choices. Highly variable outcomes. Kids enjoy. I say most kids. So if kids really enjoy your game, chances are it is not flat. Cover creates. So this is where you are these days. Hello, welcome to the stream. Yeah, this is what I do on Tuesdays, is I stream live board game design. Got my notebook here, chatting about excitement versus flatness, flatitude. Flatitude, that's going to be our word. I was talking, doing an interview for Breaking Into Board Games, which should be coming out soon, which I'm very excited about, talking with Tony and Ian. Oh man, should I even give this away? I want to give it away. Yeah. Flatitude. It's a cool word. We should make it be a thing. That's all I'm going to say. Because I remember, I'm like, oh, I don't want to give this away yet. So I'll leave it at that. A lot of stuff. Sorry about flipping cards. It is the number one. Oh, sorry equals flipping cards. Oh, what is the one I'm thinking with the popper? Is that not boggle? Okay, yeah. Is the number one game kids grab at my house on game day, mostly with the siblings, because who doesn't like enacting magic circle vengeance on their siblings? Much healthier than actual fights. Yeah, that's an important thing that games do, right? Is let us enact things and let us play out situations that we're not like fighting, taking things away from people, messing up their path. You know, that's not generally seen as messing with other people's stuff is not a healthy thing in real life, and it's something that we get to do in games. Quote unquote real life. Something we get to do in games. A younger, oh yes, game biologist. Yeah, you should. I imagine that you have a lot of thoughts on this. At younger ages, strategy games are at a disadvantage due to cognitive differences between players of different ages. Absolutely. Purely random games level the playing field, so younger kids like them more because they've got a chance at winning, and that's important. You know, I think. Oh my gosh, who's it? Plumpy Thimble on Twitter and Instagram, with the showing videos, talking with his kid, and just the winning and losing, and what a young age we understand winning and losing, and how impactful that can be. Even like, the kid can't be more than like 2 or 3, or talking with 2 or 3 year olds, and they understand the differences between the two. And everybody wants to win, right? People don't want to lose. So the randomness giving kids a chance. And I think it's funny, I'm a child in a lot of ways. Like, I think some of the ways that I approach games, like the exploration. I'm going to put this under the exciting thing too, because I think that's a good place for it. Exploration in games is good for excitement and is the enemy of flatitude or flatness. So if you can do the stuff of the game without punishment, if you can, I would say, explore the bounds of the game, or with reward even, you know, in a game that's like, you know, put cards in front of you. You can have 3 cards in front of you at any given time. A game that rewards exploration would give a lot of benefit for playing more cards. Maybe the cards combo together, right? So like, I'm going to cover this one up with this one. Now my combo changes. And seeing when you put the cards, like, oh, and this is, instead of a game where there's one combo that's the best, right, and you have a really good combo, and putting another card might completely ruin your combo, right? So a game with a balance, you need randomness in there. You need some degree of randomness, because that's what makes it, gives different people varying skill levels a chance, and makes some balance between interesting choices, and then you just have the luck of the draw. But if the game allows you to explore, you know, you're like, oh, this time I'm going to try this card and see how that combos or how that works. And you need to have imperfect information. Yeah, so we're seeing a couple of vectors here with the informational aspect. So like the data, the understanding of the game state, how much it can be known. Because if it's possible to know the game state perfectly, like with chess, right, there's not going to be as much ups and downs, because all the ups and downs are going to be from, am I playing against someone, unless I'm playing with someone with absolute equal skill to me, either they're going to be much better than me and they're just going to wreck me because they can see the board state, or I'm going to be much better than them and I understand the board state, I'm just going to do better. The variability. So if you have something where you can't know the game state because you're rolling dice or you're drawing from decks of cards, then that can lead to more excitement because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And then strategics, you're making choices that are better and worse given the game state. But because the game state's evolving, you can kind of hedge your bets and play down the cards and like see what happens. I think that comes down to the anticipation. I'm going to write that down too. Highly variable outcome, the anticipation. And there's like positive and negative anticipation, right? So excitement and dread. Both positive and negative. So this idea of seeing what happens and seeing how things evolve as you play down more cards. Like you have some idea, and having a balance of those two, right? Some idea of what will happen, some control, but not perfect information, not perfect control. So getting that balance is really where the excitement comes in, and not having a game be too flat. Cover Create says, hope you're well. Your wedding looked awesome. Thank you very much. I still need to post the official pictures for that. I have my whole album with the pictures I want to share from our awesome wedding photographer who was great. So I'm gonna post some more of those. It's on my to-do thing, but it's hard getting stuff done. Trouble has the popper. Okay, those are the ones that I was getting mixed up. Trouble and Sorry, yeah. Sarah Bob says, I hated Trouble because you need like a 6 or a 1 to leave your base, and I never popped those. Yeah, exactly. Just those are the kind of games, call them like 80% games or 90% games, or again, depending on your luck, maybe it's a 10% game, because 80% of the time, 75% of the time, it just works. You know, you look at the distributions, right? You need a 6 or a 1, so that's a 2 out of 6, 1/3, about a 30% chance, but a third of the time you'll, I guess, get out of there on your first one and then increasing, but you could never get out of there, right? Or you could go 10 turns without getting out. It's very unlikely, but it could still easily happen. So the game is consistent enough for most of the times, but every 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 times, you're just gonna have a bad day, right? Gimo says, I just got my very first video review. It was from Pumpy Fimble and was awesome. He's a cool dude. Oh my gosh, he's an amazing person, makes amazing, hilarious content, and also just an amazing human being. I can't speak enough about how great he is. Cover Create says, I just want to say hey, but I need to get back to work. After a year off from everything, I'm starting to do games again and thought of you. Good luck with the stream. Thanks, Calvert Creates. Yeah, I'll definitely be in touch. We should chat some more about game design sometime. Game Out says, I'd seen a statistical analysis of a popper recently, and they found that the popper they were using had an overall fairly uniform distribution of values, but there was a significant bias from one pop to the next. Ooh, oh my gosh. Okay, this is the kind of thing that this like weird statistical mathy stuff is, I'm very excited about that. In other words, if you popped a 2, some numbers had a higher chance of being popped next, but all numbers were popped the same number of times overall. Interesting. So see, this is the playing around with the rotational aspect, right? So if you're doing an overall analysis of the numbers, it's weird, right? It is fair and balanced and consistent. So it's interesting. the overall game experience ends up being the same, and most people probably won't even notice it unless you do the statistical analysis of it. But with the rotation, way dice rotate, it pops up. Maybe the way that it hits, it usually hits on the opposite face or like one of the side faces. Like that's dice, correct dice. It has a sum of 7, right? Which I only learned recently, which is super cool. So on most D6s, 6-sided dice, the 2 and the 5 will be on opposite sides, the 1 and the 6, and the 3 and the 4. So it seems like for this trouble popper, my guess would be if you do a 1, either you're more likely to get a 6 or you're less likely to get a 6. So that's really cool. Very interesting little tidbit there. Also just found out you can game rock, paper, scissors, which is a bit mind-blowing. Yeah, I've heard about that. I want to look into that. I'm interested to see whether it's like a psychological gaming or I want to read like a 200-page book. It's all about the history of rock, paper, scissors and like rock, paper, scissors tournaments and using rock, paper, scissors to like the most important arguments or choices that have been made with rock, paper, scissors. Like who would step on the moon first? Like, did they do that with rock, paper, scissors? Rock, paper, scissors book. Ooh, the legend of rock, paper. It's like, oh, I want to have this book or like write this book or see this book. The legend of rock, paper, scissors. Cool. Now I'm like all caught up in this rock, paper, scissors thing. It's totally going off the rails from what we're focusing on, but cool information nonetheless. All right, so excitement. I like what we're doing with our mind maps today. Usually we're brainstorming things around a specific game idea, but we're doing a little bit more of the metaphysical and philosophical, emotional experiences around games. Psychological resonance. I think that's cool, and I think it's honestly one of the most important things to think about as a game designer, and one of the hardest things to develop as you progress in your game design journey. I honestly think a lot of first-time game designers are better at this than like second, third, fourth game designers. I think a lot of people make their first game and they're looking at the games they've done in the past, they've played in the past, and they have this idea of this drama and excitement all wrapped up in the games, like, oh, and there's dice, and they're really coming at it from just like a fun perspective. And then when you learn the principles, like the right way to do game design, I think you get more caught up in the mechanics. And I've seen a lot of what I call sophomore games from designers, second or third games, be more flat, and it's almost like designers get a little nervous about that excitement and that drama, and they want, like, they did their first game, the game was pretty good, maybe there's a couple of key balance issues to it, it was broken in a couple of ways, and they're trying to go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and completely tune out the randomness and the fire, the fiero of the game, and end up making something that works and is balanced, but not as exciting. So I think it's an important topic to think about. Although I guess we did design a game, right? You flip the cards, D6 through D20, do it 4 times, and the person with the highest score wins. I mean, that's a good core. We can work from something like that. Can work in the floor is lava, anticipation, yeah, I'll just make a little bullet. Where's my bullets? Bullet list here. So that sorry. Oh yeah, I can just games that are exciting. Write down sorry and trouble. Dice rolling. Making your friends go back to the beginning. A safe space to act out all your steal your stuff fantasies. Senior Bob, was there a version of rock, paper, scissors before paper, scissors? Gamebell says, here's the Freakonomics episode I was listening that explained the psychology. Ooh, fun. I'll check that out. I fear that rock may have been a more potent method of determining a winner. Yeah, just chuck rocks at each other until someone wins, right? Again, another sidebar. Today is a very sidebar sort of a day. Rock, paper, scissors, and I'm sure it's a cultural thing. I'm sure different cultures have their own things, but it's a round robin, shoot, what's the term for that? It's the cyclical, like one thing beats the next, beats the next, beats the next. It's a very interesting concept, and it's really hard to communicate in other forms. So for Heartcatchers, has a rock, paper, scissors element to it. I'm going to forget the colors. It's actually been a while since I played, but like red catches green, green catches blue, blue catches red, or the reverse of that. One of those things. And trying to communicate that and make it clear without specifically calling out rock, paper, scissors. I spent a lot of time trying to think if there was another thing that so clearly denoted that sort of a mechanic for, like, shield beats sword, sword beats bow, bow beats shield, or the reverse of that, right? Trying to give it a mythical or historical context. And yeah, it's very ingrained in our culture, but it doesn't really make logical sense. You know, most things in the real world of like, or like with elements, right? Like water puts out fire, and fire defeats, fire melts rock, rock punches air, or whatever, right? There's hard to find a real world example that's so perfectly balanced like this, right? Like one thing, it's like an Escher drawing, right? Rock, paper, scissors, and Escher drawings where you have the thing is in front of the other thing, that's in front of the other thing, that's in front of the other thing, and it just seems so natural and inherent to our minds. If we think about it as rock, paper, scissors, we think about it as anything else. It's hard to really grok. And it's pretty fascinating, especially when trying to use it in a game as a mechanic without calling out it being rock, paper, scissors. Small rock, medium rock, large rock. Again, it doesn't work the same way, right? The large rock is always going to win, unless the small rock is, I don't know, made of titanium, or the small rock's made of diamond, and the large rock is made of dirt, shale, or something that falls apart really easily. Email just says, designing food webs in games get a lot more boring if you can't make them loop. Adding parasites or decomposers that feed on apex predators and then are eaten by stuff really along the food chain makes the whole system more interesting and loopy. Yeah, I like, that's a pretty good conceptual one. It's like the the dirt feeds the plants, plants feed the bugs, bugs feed the birds, birds feed the bigger birds, and the bigger birds break down and feed the dirt. So you can get a cycle going there. I think, like, if you think through it and logic through it, you say, like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But it's an interesting, when you're looking at mechanics for a game and you, like, build up this system, you're like, oh, it's like rock, paper, scissors. And like, oh yeah, that makes sense. One thing covers the other. Maybe if you don't mention rock, paper, scissors at all, and you're trying to be like, oh, well, the square beats the triangle, which beats the circle, which beats the square. You know, there's a lot of, there's a lot of memory to it because it doesn't directly parse. We could do like square is the paper, triangle is the scissors, circle is the rock. You can make that connection, but it's like a order of magnitude of abstraction. Like, it's abstracted a step to make it a little harder to naturally dive into it, because something like rock, paper, scissors, you just do it, right? You just know how it works. Anyways, yeah, that ended up being a longer Senator Bob says, I was also thinking about the food in the wild thing. This is a big sidebar. Exciting game and cycles, rock, paper, scissors, the food chain, the circle of life, right? I guess that kind of is the same thing. Circle of life. I guess rock, paper, scissors has that drama element to it. Kind of random and kind of choice, but like Gameologist was talking about, there is a way that you can game it. So obviously there is some strategy to it as well. It's not completely random, which compare playing rock, paper, scissors to like rolling rock, paper, scissors dice. You might think it is exactly the same thing, but it's not, which is super cool. Getting to the psychology of people playing these games. Is not flat. Alright, we got our flip the cards, roll a dice, rock, paper, scissors. Waiting in anticipation for the results, even if you're just playing for fun and not to decide who's going to be the first to go on to the moon. You still feel the joy of victory and the agony of defeat. So it's easy, which I think if you can get a good, tight, simple game, you can deal with some of the flatness, some potentials for flatness, because I was talking about part of flatness can be not having variable enough outcomes, but part of it can also be from confusion. So I think sometimes a game falls flat not because players don't have exciting choices, but because they don't know exactly what their choices are. They don't have a strong sense of what they should be doing. Confusion, lack of direction, I think I'll write it as. And under excitement, I'll put clarity. I think this is really fascinating, right? Because we're going back and forth between, well, we want things to be kind of opaque because we don't want to know exactly what's going to happen. But I want clarity in certain vectors because I want, for the actions, for what I should be doing, I want it to be fairly clear. Like, still have choices, but have clarity around what happens when I do those choices. So rock, paper, scissors, I got the choice to do rock, paper, or scissors. When I do it, I'm gonna reveal it. I'm gonna, whatever they do, if they do it again, if they do the same thing, we do it again. It's very clear every step of the way exactly what's happening. And I think for flat games that are more complex as opposed to something that's just a simple game that falls a little bit flat, like Split the Loot falling a little bit flat, the difference there is if it's a very complex game, there's a good chance that there's too much complexity and it's not exciting and fun because I'm just sitting there instead of doing the stuff of the game, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And that's obviously not very exciting. So by the way, a bunch of small rocks beats a large rock. Is this 50 or one house-sized rock or 50 rock-size houses, or pebble maybe, right? One house-sized pebble or 50 pebble-sized houses. Zero was a thorn in my side for a design. I had to add in mosquitoes and turkey vultures to get the math to work properly. I love that. Like, I need the right animals to get it to balance. It's like that horse duck question. Yeah, exactly what I said. Would you rather be hit with a small number of very large rocks or a large number of very small rocks? A horse-sized duck would freak me the heck out. I know, right? That a horse-sized duck. That would be very large ducks. Ducks are... I know geese are kind of jerks. Probably because they're bigger. I bet if ducks were bigger, they would be jerks too. They would probably be aggressive. They would be bullies. They would use their size to beat up all the other wildfowl. I don't know how this fits into excitement, but I'm going to add it to my notes. Duck-sized horses. Lots of pebbles. Duck horses. Maybe if you're playing rock, rock, rock over a number of rounds, the previously played small rock accumulate. Not duck-sized horses. I think a duck-sized horse would be pretty cute. Like, they have those little mini horses. Horse-sized duck is definitely weirder. Alright. Well, this is... We're not done with the stream quite yet. I'm not going to go too late because I need to meet a new cat sitter for our cats to take care of Inigo and Fezzik while we are in Indianapolis. We're going to go on for a little bit more, but I'm calling the stream name right now. It's going to be Rock, Rock, Rock. Because we've had a great discussion today. I'm having fun. I hope that you are enjoying this as well. If you ever jump in the middle and are a little confused what's happening, feel free to type out in the chat and let me know. If you have any game design questions, even if they're not related to what we're talking about, you can post them there as well. We tend to meander a little bit and I enjoy that, but if you're looking for something in particular or more focused, you can definitely let me know. But with that, so with all that being said, I don't know how much more focus we're going to get on an actual design for today. But it looks like the closest thing we have to an idea is this rock, rock, rock. So small rocks. Rock, rock, rock. It's a variation on rock, paper, scissors where it's all just rocks. And that's where we're starting from. I gotta learn about... Yeah, that's pretty dark. Yeah, ducks are jerks. So are we still playing with hands with this one? Question. Question mark. You do like one or like two hands for a bigger rock. Or maybe like this. This for a small rock. Could be like the rock, paper, scissors variations. If you ever look at those charts that have like 30 different things, like the crazy intersecting charts. Oh my gosh. It was like, what is the one with the most rock, paper, scissors thing? Oh my gosh. But this one has 100 or 100, 101. Helicopter, tank. Super ultimate rock, paper, scissors. Rock beats fire. Okay, so each of these: rock beats fire, scissors, human, and sponge, but is beaten by paper, air, water, and gun. Okay. Well, if you want to have your ultimate breakdown of rock, paper, scissors, feeling really trolly. I just want to make a chart like that, and it's like all the arrows and stuff, but just with a bunch of rocks. In my head, this is a game where you collect rocks before deciding what to do with them, and the dealer asks, have you had enough? Oh my gosh, I feel like I've just been rickrolled. And the dealer asks, have you had enough rocks? So yeah, every game from now on is just going to be, have you had enough X? What do we have so far on the docket? We have you had enough potato chips? Have you had enough vegetables? And now, have you had enough rocks? It's going to be a whole series of games. I think I was talking about it today. It's just, have you had enough X? And you can just put anything there. So you have rock, scissors, dynamite with really short fuse. Stolen from a comedian, because you can't like snip off the fuse with the scissors, right? Speaking about rocks, one of my prototypes I have on the back burner, rocks in the garden. I don't know about you, but when I was a child, we had a little bit of land, and we were put to work as children. Bribed, I think, is the appropriate term for what happened to us. So, yeah, we got the property, we had some land, tilled through the soil, and it was very rocky, and so our parents bribed us with a penny per rock as we would fill up this wheelbarrow. This was in the 80s. Yeah, it's definitely in the 80s. At this point in my life, I'm sure I would have asked for a much higher rate, because I think we probably ended up collecting a couple hundred rocks. So it would have only been a few dollars. I don't remember the actual payout. I'm sure that we were all happy with the way everything panned out, but it was a very strong memory I have of picking these, like just going through the dirt and picking up all these rocks. And it's like as a child, just having a little incentive, penny per rock. It's very kind of game-esque, right? Yeah, a rock, that's a penny. Like I'm just picking up pennies, right? And that's kind of cool. That's kind of fun. And then you have the longer term satisfaction of clearing out the ground, lay the foundation for the garden, where you're gonna have a cool garden. That's fun. You're gonna have food for your family, so that's fun too. Rocks before the game, tying into rocks in the garden. Rock. Yeah. The rocks on cards? Are they actual rocks? Okay, so this, like, we're being silly here, which is fine. I'm a big proponent of silly games. I want more silly games. And I think this is what this whole discussion of flatness ties back to. I think we get a little serious about game design, especially if you've been doing it for a little while. You're trying to get better at it. You're studying it. You're trying to implement really good processes and mechanics into your games. So it all gets very thinky and academic. And that's the thing we try and do here on the stream, is be a little lighter with it, be a little looser with it, brainstorm, come up with things that kind of push the boundaries of what we think of as board games. Like we had the one recently where you're making facial expressions, trying to communicate things in the game state with your facial expressions, or trying to, I think it was, trigger an emotional facial response of your choosing given your faces. That was something we hadn't quite fleshed out, but it was a cool idea. And with this one, like, we're playing rock, and you're playing with actual rocks. Like, we don't have a fully fleshed out game there, but I don't know a lot of other games that do that unless you're just making something up on the playground. And I'm excited about that thought of coming back to a playground game mentality, to a childlike mind. Small incentives, turning a rock into a penny. Email just says, we had to pick wild strawberries. The prize was our mom would bake muffins if we each picked a whole can of berries. But the berries were tiny, and it took forever to fill a can, and she didn't need 2 full cans to make muffins, so you'd sort of game it as a push your luck thing of, have I picked enough, while also trying to work less than your sibling and hope they picked more so you wouldn't have to. Oh my gosh, I like that. That's the thing too, you know, it's, you said a lot of interesting things there about, again, I keep wanting to say gamification. Gamification is not the right term. I don't really like that as a term, but adding game elements or game mechanics to an activity to make it more compelling. So in this situation, like your basic is like, well, you have the parents say, like, if you get me a bunch of strawberries, I'll make muffins. And it's like, okay, I like muffins, I want muffins, but within the moment to moment of collecting those strawberries, you have it's an external motivator, right? External incentives. Strawberries for muffins. And especially as a child, keeping that in your mind, and even as an adult, right? Like, fighting against instant gratification. And telling yourself, like, I run into this all the time for, okay, if I go to sleep right now, I'm going to get plenty of sleep, I'm going to wake up refreshed, it's going to be really nice. And then on the other hand, I started reading a book and it's very exciting, I want to see what happens next. And it's a constant struggle, right? The instant gratification versus the long-term gratification. And the game aspect, the mechanics, kind of shortcuts this, right? Because in the moment, this pulls your motivation from the future to the present, right? So instead of like having to keep focus on, I want those muffins, I'm gonna get those muffins in the future, it's gonna be really great, but balance that with the grind of picking the strawberries, you know. It's fun, but after a while, you know, it's like, it gets to be a lot, I get tired, keeping up that motivation. You have the moment-to-moment competition of, on the one hand, like, oh, I'm picking more than my sibling, or on the other hand, and you want more strawberries too in your muffins, so it's kind of a weird back and forth. It's like, well, I don't want to have to pick as many of them, so can I just like fill it up a certain amount and be like, is this enough? and trying to pick more slowly. So it's like a slow race sort of a thing. Also, wild strawberries taste so good. So you would eat them as you pick, which was yummy, but also took you further away from the muffins, right? I know, we used to... we picked all sorts of berries in my family. But we used to pick blueberries was the big thing. Well, my grandparents actually had a strawberry farm in Norway, so we got to experience the strawberry thing. But we also lived in Maine for a long time, and there was the wild blueberry fields. So we go and pick blueberries, and we ate a lot of blueberries. A lot of those blueberries did not make it back home. So yeah, that's the thing. You want the strawberries, you want to eat them, and it's probably for your parents an incentive. They're like, well, we actually want to make these muffins. You eat all the strawberries, we're not gonna have any muffins. So you need to have some proper incentivization. So that's where we're going in a couple. We have some converging threads here, which is kind of fun. Collecting of things, whether they're berries or rocks. Reverse incentives to get a certain amount collectively, but the least individually. I think that's another thing when we're looking at exciting games or games that aren't flat. Tensions. Did I put tension in here? Tension's important. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I got it there, dramatic tension. So that's a very good thing to focus on if you want to combat flatness. Flatitude is the word we're gonna try and make become a thing. Combat flatitude in your games is having a tension, a back and forth. So if you look at your game, this is an engine building game, for example, and you have cards like, oh, I get the resources, I convert the resources into the things, and then I get a better thing, and I get points, and that's the whole game. That's a recipe. It's fine mechanically, but not particularly exciting. An easy way to add some excitement is to look at what players want to do and not undo it, or give them like multiple things they want to do. So for multiple motivations that are opposite from each other. And this can be long-term goal versus short-term goal. Resources versus points is a good one. So something you could like, oh, there's a lot of resources on this particular thing, and I can use it to get more stuff in the future, but this one has a lot of points. I don't know how long the game is going to go on, so there can be an interesting tension there. Multiple people wanting the same thing creates tension. Yeah, reverse incentives to get a certain amount collectively, but least individually. This is an interesting thing to look at, and it's cool. One of the games that Phil and I roughly prototyped, I don't know if we finished the prototype, but the concept of it was a snail race where the snails were riding a river of cheese to be eaten, and you're trying to be the last snail, so you won by being the last, then you didn't get eaten. A little grim, I know, sorry about that. But the river kept moving, so you're trying to be as slow as possible, but you could never stop. So if you're doing this reverse incentive things. So we'll say we're collecting the strawberries. Or we'll say we're collecting the rocks in our pail or on our player board. You need to have a collective total of 15 rocks before anyone can win. So that's the end goal of the game. Each turn you can pick up X number of rocks. The person with the fewest rocks wins. So this is the beginnings of the game, right? It's not quite a game because without any additional rules, everyone's just going to pick up one rock per turn, and if there's an uneven number of rocks, some people will have a tie, right? The people who went later in the turn order won't have to pick up the rocks. If there's an even number of rocks, everyone's just going to tie. So not quite a game. There's definitely the tension between picking up a certain number of rocks, like having to pick up the rocks, but not wanting the rocks, but wanting some rocks. So we need at least one additional rule to make that interesting. And again, we're thinking and discussing today specifically games that are not flat at all. So a few ways we can do that. We should talk about here: tensions, long versus short, resources, multiple people wanting the same thing, fighting over things. So we have one tension here, and it's like, how about let's introduce another tension. So what if you take the fewest rocks, you have to take an extra rock. Or you have to take 2 extra rocks. So this one, now we look at turn order, right? So picture this same game. I take a rock, you take a rock, you take a rock, you take a rock, and then if we can see what everyone else has done, then the last player is always going to take 2 rocks, right? Because then everyone else in the circle who didn't take 2, they all have the least, and they go up to 3 rocks, right? So again, pretty prescriptive. But then again, knowing that this is going to happen, do you just take 2 rocks and then the person after you will take 3 rocks? So you see, this is a simple variation, but potentially some tension in here. Maybe you have a bound for how many rocks you can take. Potentially people take rocks in turn order. So I'm going to make this bullets because we've got a couple of options here. It's going to be a different game with different tensions depending on how you do the player order. So each player takes, and then I mentioned there would be that psychological element. Psych people out. It's like, well, if I take 2, then no one can take 1 after me, and with that test, it's probably broken. So I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it, but it's a thought. People take rocks in turn order, take them simultaneously, completely secretly. People take them simultaneously Simultaneously, that's not how you spell it, simultaneously. Simultaneously, partially, secretly. So that could be fun if you're like taking rock, you keep going like this and no one knows if you're taking a rock or not taking a rock. I think the full supply of rocks would have to be hidden or something. I mean, there's too many rocks to count. So yeah, we have the framework, we have the beginnings of a game with some excitement and tension built in there. Eating strawberries is the short-term goal. Getting muffins is the long-term goal. Have you had enough strawberries? There's another game for our Have You Had Enough series. Don't you harvest blueberries with a big comb thing? See, we gotta have to get into a very serious and complex blueberry collection conversation. So there's multiple types of blueberries. There's high bush and low bush. The ones in Maine are still low bush. If you're harvesting them professionally, you do use the combs called a blueberry rake to do so, and they have like big old ones. If you are just collecting them by yourself, we had a little rake thing to pick them with. I think we had 1 or 2 that we got eventually. The issue with that is if you are raking the blueberries, you get a lot of leaves and stuff in them. They're harder to clean, which is probably the worst part of blueberries, is trying to clean them and get all the stems and little bits out of them. So picking them, you'd have less cleaning work if you did them manually, which was desirable because I really didn't like the cleaning part of it. Win condition: eat everything you pick while convincing your brother to pick enough to make muffins. Nice. I like this more with strawberries. I mean, I love strawberries. It's my favorite fruit. Than with the rocks necessarily, but I could see either way. Alright, I'm gonna read through the rest of the chat. I realize I have to make sure that the cat sitter can get into the apartment. So I'm gonna check on that real quick. I'm gonna finish reading the chat and then we're gonna have to cut it short. But thanks as always for joining me. Big comb thing. I've always used this in my hands. Yeah, exactly. Are you thinking cranberries? Yeah. Senior Bob, so when I was younger and had aspirations to be a writer, I would think of a whimsical idea that was cool, but when I fleshed it out and expanded the world, I'd wind up making it boring. Oh, yeah, I feel this. I'm with you there, Senior Bob. Like, that's, as a departure from the game, working on also being a writer, I've also done the same. I've started a million stories and been super excited about the premise of it or the characters or something, and the actual work of fleshing it out just always seemed to kill it. Like, maybe for a few pages or 20 pages it would be exciting, but I always hit a wall. And I think that's just, being creative is hard, and making a creative product, like a finished thing, a book or a story or a movie or whatever, it's a lot of work, and the fun moments come and go, right? It's like fun and it's exciting, and the cool stuff is happening, like there's a dramatic moment, but then there's all the interstitial things that you have to work in there. You have to tie things together, and you have to do a character arc, and a relationship in the story doesn't work as well as you thought it was going to work. And same with game design, right? Like, the mechanics aren't gelling, there's in your head it worked really seamlessly, like this rocks game, like that sounds great, ship it, right? But once you get to testing it, you're like, oh wait, everyone always does 2, or this one group, they always do 1, and they always tie, and they're breaking my game. So once you get it in front of actual humans, either to read your story or to play your game, it often does fall apart. So I hear you there, and that's definitely one of the toughest things about doing creative projects. Blind bag draw of rocks, secretly taking a route. Oh yeah, that's mechanically blind bag. Yes, that solves my mechanical thing. Funnest berry I've ever harvested: mulberry. Put sheets under the tree and shake it until berries fall off onto the sheets. I think my parents have mulberry trees. Mulberry bushes? Trees? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's going to be it for today. We've come up with a bit of a game. We have a title. We have a game emerging. Something, wasn't sure if it was all going to come together, but I think we went over a lot of really cool stuff today. I had a fun time. Again, if there's anything particular you ever want to cover, if you want to focus more on coming up with a game, we can do that. If you ever want to discuss more about the industry or design in general, always happy to do that as well. Always have a great time with you all and really appreciate you hanging out with me here. It's a huge help to my process, to my skill, and I hope it's a help to you as well. I'm not going to be here next week because I will be traveling / in Gen Con. So it's going to be it for a while. I'm not sure when I will be streaming next, but I will let all y'all know. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.